they tell us that capitalism will come to an end since hundreds of years. Even Karl Marx said, and I think in Karl Marx's works there are 3,000 predictions of the end of capitalism, but it never happened. And after him, I think that we had tens or hundreds of thousands. The last time was in the financial crisis 2008, and then even in the corona crisis we had a lot of articles and prophecies from left-wing intellectuals that this will be the end of capitalism. And of course there's not a guarantee that capitalism will not come to the end, but if capitalism will come to an end, it's not because of, as they will tell us, this inner contradictions of capitalism, but capitalism can only come to an end because of because the anti-capitalists are so powerful to do something against it. The good thing with capitalism is that capitalism is something like a permanent revolution, that is a system that changes and adapts all the time to new circumstances. Things can change, but capitalism changed all over the time. And so, but it's hard to predict. But I can guarantee one thing. If capitalism comes to an end, it's not because of capitalism or because capitalism causes crisis, because when capitalism would come to an end, it's only because he has not much people to defend capitalism, and because that in politics and in culture, the anti-capitalists are stronger than the pro-capitalists. One is, of course, that capitalism is to blame for hunger and poverty. You hear it very often. This is absolutely crazy because 200 years ago, before capitalism, 90% of the worldwide population lived in extreme poverty. Today it's less than 10%. Half of this reduction happened over the last decade. So this is absolutely stupid. Another thing that is very stupid is the idea that a planned economy can solve environmental problems or problems of climate change. No, anti-capitalism, planned economy never solved any problem in history. They caused a lot of problems, especially for the environment. And I think this is an absolutely dangerous idea if especially young people believe we have to abolish capitalism to do something for the environment. And another thing is this about monopolies that you hear so often, that capitalism leads to monopolies. What is true? Sometimes capitalism can lead to monopolies, but much more important, capitalism destroys monopolies all over the time. It happened with all the monopolies 100 years ago. Lenin had his famous book about imperialism at the last stage of capitalism, monopoly capitalism, and none of these monopolies that he called then the last stage of capitalism exists today. And the same is with monopolies that were criticized some decades ago. These are only some examples of myths about capitalism that are absolutely nonsense. I think we have to distinguish first between Russia and China. Russia, this has nothing to do with capitalism. I call it as a kleptocracy. They started, it was not so bad in the beginning of the 2000s, and then Putin, when he started to go against Khodorkovsky and all this, it was like a kleptocracy. They still, the most important thing for capitalism is that there's a guarantee for private property rights, and there is no guarantee for private property rights. If the government or Putin makes a decision to take it away, then it's to do it. So it has nothing to do with capitalism. And on the other hand, this is absolutely a loser nation in the economy. They have the biggest resources of commodities all over the world. It's the biggest country in the world, but their GDP per capita was even lower than Italy before the war started. I don't speak about the situation now. So this is a complete loser nation. They are only strong because they have this atomic weapons. Otherwise, no one would take them serious. China is a very different story. China is very successful in the last decades, one of the most successful economies in the world. It never happened in history that the number of people living in poverty was reduced from 88%, what was 1981, to less than 1%, what it is today. So it's amazing what happened there. But it's important to understand it. I have a chapter in my book, not written by me, but by Zhang Weiying. He's a Chinese economist from Beijing University, and he explained very often to me, our success was not because of the state, but in spite of the state. Of course, they started with 100% state, and you have a lot of state there, but if you come from 100% state and then you reduce it, though they still have a lot of state, but their success was because of private companies, private capitalist companies. The problem with China is that they had this huge success, but in the last years they go back in the wrong direction. They went always reduce state, more private, more market, less state, and now they go in the different direction, more state, less market. And this will be very bad not only for China but for all over the world, because more or less we all depend on what happens in China today. I think, there is nowhere in the world, not in Europe, not in the United States, not in China, you have nowhere pure capitalism or pure socialism. Even there's no pure socialism. Even in North Korea they have a little bit private property, and in Poland in socialist times they had some private property, and in the so-called capitalist countries you have a lot of socialism. Even the United States, some people here in Europe, they think the United States is a pure capitalist country. It's absolutely nonsense. They have a huge welfare state that in the last decades became stronger and stronger and stronger. So we have everywhere mixed systems in reality between capitalism and socialism, and I compare it with a test tube. If you have a test tube and you have two ingredients, market and state, or capitalism and socialism, and then you look what happens if you add more market, as they did, for example, in Vietnam or in China or in Poland in the last decades, then situation improves for the people. Or you add more state, as it did in Venezuela, what was very extreme, add more state, then the situation becomes worse. And what we are doing now in Europe is adding more and more state, less free market, more planned economy, and this will have very bad consequences, because it don't happen from one day to the next, but sometimes people forget why they become successful. It is like someone, maybe you start now with diet and you lose, let's say, 80 kilo, and because maybe you stop eating pizza, stop eating chocolate, stop eating ice cream, all this stuff, you make this diet, then maybe you have something like 80 kilo, and then after 1 year, 2 years, you think, why shouldn't I eat a pizza, why shouldn't I eat a chocolate, I have no problem with my body. What happens? You will gain weight again, and this is because this is what happens with almost all countries. Sooner or later they forget why and how they became successful. It happened in Germany. We became successful because this market economy with Ludwig Erhard, and we had some economic reforms in the beginning of the 2000s. Chile, people even in Chile, the most successful country in Latin America, they forgot it and they voted for a socialist president. And things will become worse. So that's a big problem, that after time people forget why they became successful. And this is exactly what happens in Europe now.